Okay, Bergson and the Holographic Theory of Mind, Part 49, on entropy, or time is a force. We'll be looking then at the second law of thermodynamics, entropy, which Bergson called the most metaphysical of laws. This will take us to the notion of measurement and the actual unreality of laws. And sub to this, the notion of order and disorder, or the two orders, the ancients focusing on genera, the moderns on law, where genera are derived, sort of. All the subtext to the problem of laws. And this leads us to the ultimate notion that creation must be unceasing, and that time is a force. In Sean Carroll's book, From Eternity to Here, The Quest for the Ultimate Theory of Time, what we see is a book totally devoted to entropy, the notion of entropy. His limited scope is this: why the apparent very low entropy at the start of the universe, before the Big Bang? Let me just expand the little picture up there for 1 second so you can see it. Entropy on the left, the ice cube, the crystal structure. So this is minimum entropy, maximum order. Order and entropy are inverse. On the right, as we degrade, less and less structure, maximum entropy. Entropy is increasing, but order is decreasing. So before the Big Bang, we have the universe a long time ago with minimum entropy. And as we evolve over time, the universe now, we have maximum entropy, less and less order. But the question is, how do you explain this low entropic state in the beginning? So it's an exhaustive and exhausting trip in this book. He touches several topics we've gone through here. For example, Schrödinger's, what is life? And Schrödinger saying, no known laws of physics can explain life. But for Carroll, Schrödinger's aperiodic crystal hypothesis inspired Crick and the DNA concept. He notes that. And that's the end of the story, as though somehow DNA solves this problem that no known laws of physics can explain life. And then we hit special relativity, and it's block time. That is, our chicken, our four-dimensional chicken, is in reality a four-dimensional block with no motion. The entirety of the chicken is there. Everything is static and laid out in one massive four-dimensional structure. So he admits this model should end all discussion on entropy, for there is no flow of time, entropy, or otherwise in special relativity. And then he simply marches on. Though we say, wait, we thought block time was special relativity's logical implication. So say the gurus. Oh, he just goes on. Carroll, in my opinion, is an exemplar of the confusions of the physicists. So in Kant and the Wasp, in number 47, we noted Bergson's comment on the simple event of dissolving sugar in a glass of water. He said, duration, the real concrete flow of time, is the very stuff of reality. We must wait for the sugar to dissolve. Only in abstract space can this event of sugar dissolving be sped up or slowed down, as if we will. The universe transforms at a certain pace. Time is a force. And then we noted this comment: the duration of the universe, that is, the paced unfolding of the universe, must therefore be one with the latitude of creation, which can find place in it. So the very pace of the universe is an expression of the creation possibilities within the universe and its unfolding. So I said this would have to be explained, and a lot. In doing so, we'll see the thought straitjacket that physicists like Carroll are wearing. It's a metaphysical straitjacket. Bergson uses the water glass and sugar already in page 10 of Creative Evolution. Already we see a major theme, and as usual, the casual reference to his profound insight in matter and memory. Bergson poses the general problem. For a conscious being to exist is to change is to mature is to go on creating oneself endlessly. Should the same be said of existence in general? That is just not conscious beings, but everything we call the material world. Material objects, a glass, the water itself, a cube of Lego blocks, change it via an external force. We look at it, particularly in physics, as a displacement of parts. If the parts change, well, these too are composed of parts, which are then displaced. And so on, till we stop at what we determine or arbitrarily decide is the unchangeable element, the ultimate atom, or whatever. When a part leaves this position, nothing prevents its return. So a group of elements can always find its way back to the original state, either by itself or by some external force. So any state, or a Lego block there, can be repeated. The implication, the group does not grow old. It has no history. There's nothing created in this type of change, in this simple displacement of parts and replacement. A superhuman intelligence, a la Laplace, computing the velocities of each part, can predict the future form. This formation and reformation takes place, of course, in the abstract time of the classic metaphysic, as we've noted many times. This time is only the noting of simultaneities in space. By convention, say, we can create a time unit. Each coincidence of the tail of the parrot with that knob I'm pointing to there, we'll call 1 second. Each coincidence of the Earth and the Sun at a certain point, where my yellow line is, 1 year. We could speed up the turntable, our criterion or standard of time, and double it. The time measures actually unchanged, for the same spatial simultaneities still occur, tail to knob. Abstract time does not care what happens in the interval itself, only at the ends of the interval, at the knob. Speed up the entire universe. Make the speed infinite, so fast it lays out like a block in space. The measured time, the mathematical time, does not change. You still have the same number of simultaneities. But there is succession. We must wait for that sugar to dissolve. This waiting time is not the mathematical time. It is not the time that would apply to the entire history of the material world. It is no longer something thought, says Bergson. It is something lived. It is no longer a relation that is of tail, parrot tail to knob, or planet to some point. It is an absolute. It's no longer a relation of points in space. The glass is an isolated system. What else can this mean than that the glass of water, the sugar, and the process of the sugar's melting are abstractions, and that the whole within which they have been caught out by my senses and understanding progresses, it may be, in the manner of a consciousness. So the glass is simply a cutout, an arbitrary isolation from the whole. Again, we note Bergson's comment in Matter and Memory. The whole is transforming. Objects, the glass, and their motions, moving from point to point, are changes or transferences of state within this global motion, like waves. So matter has a tendency to constitute isolable systems. These can be treated geometrically. We'll see this in a moment in measurement and physical laws. But the isolation is never complete. To quote, the thread attaching it to the rest of the universe doubtless is very tenuous. Nevertheless, it is along that thread that is transmitted down to the smallest particle of the world in which we live, the duration immanent in the whole of the universe. Continuing, the systems marked off by science endure only because they are bound up inseparably with the rest of the universe. So ultimately, he is referring to as matter-memory, holographic vision of this transforming field. The distinct outlines we see in an object, only the design of a certain influence that we might exert at a certain point in space, the plan of our eventual actions. In other words, he's referring to perception as virtual action in matter and memory, and that the fact that the field is a holographic field. To quote matter memory, the photograph already develops in the very heart of things in every point of space, and the brain effectively then is a modulated reconstructive wave. Again, the standard oblique reference to what he talked about in matter and memory. So he says, suppress this action, virtual action, and the individuality of the body is reabsorbed in the universal interaction. It is, that coffee cup is no longer carved out from the holographic field. It is the very essence of mechanism. To consider as metaphorical every expression which attributes to time an effective action. Concrete duration is denied, where concrete duration, or the present instant, is the reflection of and integrally bound with the entire preceding series of instants. Integrally bound with. Change must be reducible to an arrangement and rearrangement of parts. The irreversibility of time must be in appearance relative to our ignorance. The impossibility of turning back must be only the inability of man to put things in place again. So growing old can be nothing more than the gradual gain or loss of certain substances. Loss in cells of internutritive substances, increase of toxins. Time is no more reality than an hourglass. Just flip it to return things back to the start. The cause of aging must lie deeper than the simple rearrangement of parts. The impetus which causes a living being to grow larger, to develop and age, is the same that has caused it to pass through the phases of embryonic life, says Bergson. It is evident that a change like that of puberty, is in course of preparation at every instant from birth. An unorganized body that is inorganic, like our Lego block, its present state or present instant depends entirely on the state of the previous instant. As an isolated system, the position of its points is determined by the position of the same point at the previous instant, thus by equations with coefficients like ds, dt, dv, dt, etc. Is this so with the laws of life? To quote, does the state of a living organic body find its complete explanation in the state immediately before, like the solar system? Yes, if there is an a priori agreement to liken the living body to an inorganic body, treat the living as the systems studied by the physicist, the chemist, the astronomer. Remember, we noted in 47, Kant's vision of a unified science, physics, biology, psychology. To quote, the idea of a science that is one, capable of binding with the same force all the parts of what is given, on all sides in equal solidity, physics, biology, psychology. But for the organic, this mathematical treatment is not possible. To quote, the idea that a living body might be treated by some superhuman calculator in the same mathematical way as our solar system has gradually arisen from a metaphysic which has taken a more precise form since the physical discoveries of Galileo. The apparent clearness of this metaphysic, our impatient desire to find it true. Just consider the unstoppable enthusiasm and desire for the AI people to prove that their mathematical metaphysic description of the brain is true. The enthusiasm with which so many excellent minds accept without proof should put us on our guard against this. No, this is not due to our ignorance, but rather, for a living body, the present instant is not explained by the immediate previous instant. All the past of the organism must be added to that moment, to that present instant. This is the cardinal difference between abstract time and concrete time. What does it mean to say that the state of an artificial system depends on what it was at the moment immediately before? There is no instant immediately before another instant. There could not be, any more than there could be one mathematical point touching another. The instant immediately before is connected with the present instant by the interval dt, a tiny change of time. So we're saying the present state is defined by equations with differential coefficients like ds dt, change of space over change of time, dv dt, change of velocity with respect to time. That is by present velocities and present accelerations. That is a present considered along with its tendency. The systems science works with are in fact in an instantaneous present that is always being renewed. Again, we're coming back to that picture. Every time instant is equivalent to a cube of space, or the all of space. But these are frozen. How to renew them, we'll come back to that. Never in that real, concrete duration in which past remains bound up with the present. When the mathematician calculates the future state of the system at time t, there is nothing to prevent him from supposing that the universe vanishes from this moment till that, and suddenly reappears. It is only the tth moment that counts. This is a mere instant, not the interval. Just where that tail hits. The scientist places himself at the extremity of the interval. He divides the interval into infinitely small parts, little dt's. He's now computing accelerations, velocities, that is tendencies, but still he is speaking of static moments, not flowing time. That is, he has a series of such extremities or ends of intervals, which he calls instants. The world of the mathematician, a world that dies and is reborn at every instant, the world which Descartes was thinking of when he spoke of continued creation. Coming back to that picture we've noted before. Every moment, every instant, and every point along that movement of that cup corresponds to a cube of the instantaneous space, all of space. Unrolling via a deterministic law, like our billiard balls. Ultimately, then, a vast four-dimensional block. But the problem is each of these spaces is frozen. They're a frozen instant. No change is possible. How do you introduce change? Well, you need a God to create block after block after block, instant after instant. This is what Descartes was thinking of when he spoke of continued creation. So physics fools itself. It cannot escape continuous creation. This instantaneity of this block is an abstract limit, and this isolation of this system from the universe is an abstract limit. Neither is reached in the concretely transforming concrete world. No system is isolated from the indivisible global transformation. That is, the glass is a separate object, and motion is not real. But this assumption rests at the base of measurement, and thus of the laws of science. Bergson uses boiling water on a stove as an example. Yes, the system can be practically isolated, but in reality, it is bound up with other objects and operations. He quotes, "In the end, I should find that our entire solar system is concerned with what is being done at this particular point of space. I'm sure, given the stove, the pot, the heat, that the water will boil. But the source of the certainty, my little microcosm of the pot and the stove, is dealing with magnitudes, and these involve logical consequences. The difference is 7 minus 3, that is 4. It's logically forced, given two sides of a triangle. The third is forced. So we have a geometric, mathematical, logical forcing. To say the water will boil today, just as it did yesterday, I am vaguely imagining placing the stove of yesterday on stove of today, the kettle of yesterday on the kettle of today, water on water, duration on duration. Just as superimposing two triangles where the two sides are the same, the third must match. But to imagine this, to superimpose yesterday on today, firstly, yesterday's system had to wait for today's, that is, time had to halt, and everything has to become simultaneous. This happens in geometry, and only in geometry, a purely spatial operation. In this inductive process, we're dealing with induction here, but both physicist and geometrician, time does not count. And note, we're superimposing qualities as if magnitudes. But what is the coincidence of two qualities? The aroma, the clinking, the form of the flow, the feel of the stirring, the bubbling, say of the coffee cup. How are they identical? We're ignoring this question as well. Our inductions are certain in the exact degree in which we make qualitative differences melt into the homogeneity of the space which subtends them, in other words, to those instantaneous blocks. So that geometry is the ideal limit of our inductions as well as of our deductions. What this induction discovers, the law, the mathematical order, these physical laws, even my invariance laws, have no positive reality. The law is the form toward which an interruption proceeds. So here we've hit a core within Bergson's vision. The vision is this. It is consciousness, the inextensive that pushes the universe into existence. This push is an intensive force. The relaxation or lessening of this force is the emergence of the extensive, the material world, with its geometric tendencies, or mathematical order. To quote, whereas the power of creation once given, and it exists, we are conscious of it in ourselves, has only to be diverted from itself, to relax its tension, only to relax its tension to extend, only to extend for the mathematical order of the elements so distinguished, and the inflexible determinism connecting them to manifest the interruption of the creative act. Continuing. In fact, inflexible determinism and mathematical order are one with this very interruption. And it is merely this negative tendency that the particular laws of the physical world express, none of them taken separately as objective reality. It's a negative tendency. He notes that each law is the work of an investigator who isolated certain variables, worked from a certain bias, applied conventional units of measurement. Yes, there is an order, approximately mathematical, immanent in matter, and science progresses towards and approaches this. For if matter is a relaxation of the inextensive into the extensive, and thereby of liberty into necessity, it does not indeed wholly coincide with pure homogeneous space. Yet it is constituted by the movement that leads to space, and therefore on the way to geometry. That is, to this abstract space, the 4D continuum of points underlying the classic metaphysic. It's an ideal limit. It's never concretely reached. The tendency is toward this, and that's why physics works, but it's never concretely reached. This is concrete extensity. This is the true concrete extensity, and it is not the mathematical order as we envision it. Now, Bergson insists there's something artificial in the mathematical form of physical law. He notes, measuring is a wholly human operation, which implies that really or ideally we superpose two objects, one on another, a certain number of times. Nature, he says, did not dream this superposition. It's not a natural thing. The mathematical order is nothing positive. It is the form to which a certain interruption tends of itself, and that materiality is precisely an interruption of this kind. So Erodon, there's also a lesson of force is an interruption of the movement. Physics is relative to the variables it has chosen, the order of the problems examined. Yet it succeeds, for though there is no definite system of mathematical laws, matter inclines to this form, this geometrical form. Now I note this anticipates and nears a theme that is laws change, evolved. There's no precise set of mathematical laws that would find in Unger and Smolin in the singular universe of 2014, but I think Bergson's considerations that lead to this are quite different and beyond Unger and Smolin. Philosophers will not like this. The mathematical order is deemed something positive. It is a triumph over disorder. But, says Bergson, the idea persists that there might be no order at all, and that the mathematical order of things, being a conquest over disorder, possesses a positive reality. And we could throw Mr. Penrose, Dr. Penrose, into this with his resurrection of Platonic ideas, mathematical Platonic ideas, along with multitudes of other people in a more subtle way. The absence of order, for the realist, he says objective laws impose on the virtual disorder of nature. For the idealist, the disorder is alleviated by a sensuous manifold coordinated under the organizing influence of our understanding. That, as we saw in number 47, is Kant, the abstract space, which is really understanding. Disorder, Bergson knows, is a negative idea, and the content of a negative idea is extremely important to surface. And I note here, there's an aligned problem. There's a famous quote in Creative Evolution, quote, "I have no sooner commenced to philosophize than I ask myself why I exist. Whence comes it, and how can it be understood that anything exists?" In other words, why is there something other than nothing? Nothing also is a negative idea, and is highly correlated with the problem of disorder. Bergson apologizes profusely in his 26-page discussion of the concept of nothing, for it seems highly abstruse, but as usual, he has a very concrete reason. He's tying philosophy to the fact. And in this case, this problem is the basis of a scientific misconception. But we won't go into that in detail here. In general, the absence of one order is the presence of another. I pick a book, War and Peace. I say this is not verse, but I've not seen the absence of verse. I've seen prose. I can ask this question, is there some form of language or prose or verse overlay? But this question would be absurd. And the absurdity would lie in this, that we are hypostasizing that as the substratum of prose and poetry, the simultaneous negation of both, forgetting that the negation of one consists in the affirmation of the other. Disorder, the true meaning thereof, it denotes the absence of a certain order, but to the profit of another order, which we don't happen to be concerned with. But philosophically, this is lost sight of. So there arises the problem of how order is imposed on disorder, form on matter. In analyzing the idea of disorder, thus subtilized, we see that it presents nothing at all. There are two kinds of order, Bergson argues, and these are generally confused. These stem from two movements of the mind. The natural direction tension, continuous creation, free action. The inversion of this, extension, externally related elements, geometrical mechanism. The second order is the geometrical, the necessary relation of cause and effects, the admirable order of the astronomical. It can be foreseen mathematically. The first order is that of the vital or the will. From your example, the Symphony of Beethoven, no less admirable in order, but originality, unforeseeability itself. And Beethoven is an extreme example, but we create them all the time, even when lifting a coffee cup. Both orders repeat. Both enable the mind to generalize. The vital order is offered piecemeal in experience. We see frog after frog. We see order in nature. But this order is from an indivisible act. The near identity of individuals, humans, frogs, this arises from an entirely different source than the identity derived by the composition of same causes. The seeming identity, hence the idea of a general order of nature applying to life and matter equally, quote, hence our habit is designated by the same word and represented in the same way the existence of laws in the domain of inert matter and that of genera in the domain of life. The ancients were not interested in how nature conforms to laws. Rather, why ordered according to genera. This led to the clumsy physics, formed in terms of the vital, as we saw in 47. Reality, however, is a system of genera. So it is the generality of the genera, it is the generality of laws that the ancients sought. In effect, the generality expressive of the vital order. Aristotle's law of falling bodies, filled with terms like the proper place, high, low, forced movement, natural movement. The stone regains its natural place. Like a living being, the genus stone. But there's the same confusion for the moderns, with a slight difference. For the moderns, the laws are no longer reduced to genera. Rather, genera are reduced to laws. Our theory of knowledge turns almost entirely, to quote Bergson, on the question of laws. Genera are left to make shift with laws as best they can. This again goes back to the laws of Kepler and Galileo. But a law is a relation between things, expressed in magnitude as a function of several other appropriately chosen, always variables. It is a comparison, an objective reality for an intelligence that represents to itself several items at the same time. I'm looking at planet, sun, areas, etc. Relations. The intelligence can be an impersonal intellect, like we saw with Kant. But it is relative. It is relative to the human understanding, to that comparison process. Kant only brought this to light. It is an implicit in the universe of laws, coming from Kepler, Galileo et al. For moderns and ancients, the confusion between the two kinds of order, the confusion's origins, the vital order, that is creation manifested in things which imitate the geometric physical order, repetitions that make generalization possible. But the repetition is essential in the physical order, which is automatic, accidental in the vital order, or willed. So to the question, how is science possible? That is, why is there order rather than disorder? The answer, there is always order, one or the other. The absence of one is the presence of the other. So Bergson says, by a simple sic jubeo, the mind posits a disorder, which is an, quote, absence of order. In so doing, it thinks a word or a set of words, nothing more. Word salad. So this chaos and disorder, it's a mythical region between the two orders, the vital order and the mathematical order, or extended order. The vital order is the creative order, just as the intuition by a poem is interrupted. halted to become a separate set of words. Great poem there. Matter and its order is this interruption, but creation is not stopped. The mystery that spreads over the existence of the universe, to quote Bergson, comes in part from this, that we want the genesis of it to have been accomplished in one stroke, or the whole of matter to be eternal. Whether we speak of creation or posit an uncreated matter, it is the totality of the universe that we are considering at once. This is from the dominance of this idea. There is no really acting duration or time. Clear this prejudice. The idea of creation becomes more clear, for it is merged with that of growth, but is no longer then of the universe in its totality that we must speak. So then we come to the second law. We may apply the laws of physics to our world as a relatively isolated system, but nothing tells us they apply to the entire universe. For the universe is not made all at once, but it's being made continually. It is growing, perhaps indefinitely, by the addition of new worlds. So we come to the first and second laws. The first, conservation of energy. This is quantitative, hence relative. It is tailored to measuring a certain form of energy, certain variables. It is concerned with a fragment of this world relating to another fragment, not to the nature of the whole. The second law, entropy, is the most metaphysical of physical laws. The essence, all physical changes tend to degrade into heat, and the heat distributed. There is no artifice of measurement here. It tells us changes that are visible and heterogeneous will be more and more diluted into changes that are invisible and homogeneous. And, to quote, the instability to which we owe the richness and variety of changes taking place in our solar system will gradually give way to the relative stability of elementary vibrations continually and perpetually repeated. From whence does this mutability come? Note, this is in effect Sean Carroll's question. How do we account for the mutability, the low entropy at the beginning of the universe? From some other point in space, but this just starts in infinite regress, because then we can always deduce yet another point in space. An infinite universe? This admits the coincidence of matter with abstract space. The continuum of points position is 4D. But how would one reconcile this with the holographic vision of the universe, the reciprocal action of all parts of matter upon each other? That is, one can't reconcile a continuum of external points, completely mutually external, with the holographic vision. Alternating phases of stability and instability? Boltzmann showed it was mathematically improbable to the point of impossibility. The problem is insoluble, stating upon the grounds of physics. The physicist must remain in space, that is, his abstract space. He belies his role if he seeks the source in an extraspatial process. But this is where we must go, the extraspatial process. It is not extension in the abstract we are trying to explain. Extension is attention interrupted, for Bergson. If the abstract space, is an ideal limit, never reached, we are explaining concrete reality, truly extended. There is an order that reigns there. Born in the inverse order, the vital is suppressed. This suggests a thing unmaking itself. To quote, what conclusion, if not that the process by which a thing makes itself is directed in a contrary way to that of physical processes, that it is therefore, by its very definition, immaterial. Bergson expands these thoughts, the making and the unmaking, the storing of energy against the flow of entropy, the elaborate mechanism in biological systems for this. For example, a frog up there storing energy to unleash that tongue on the fly. But Let's take this again to the glass and the sugar. Why must we wait? The question we started. We are conscious beings. We are not interested in the extremities of intervals. We feel and live the intervals themselves. The parrot is living that interval, all those intervals. We are one with, participating in the duration unfolding in the glass. That is, participating in the creative unfolding of the universal field, along with the glass. Time, duration, is a force, the creative force. This is why everything cannot be given at once. Like the cinematographic projection we talked about in number 47, that is just displaying a change with infinite velocity. Like, for example, the growth of a being just as fast as one can. Infinite velocity of growth. We don't have that leisure. To quote Bergson, the more I consider this point, if the future is bound to succeed the present, it is because the future is not altogether determined at the present moment. It is because there is unceasingly being created in it, not indeed in any such artificially isolated system as a glass of sugared water, but in the concrete whole of which every system forms a part, something unforeseeable and new. The duration of the universe, that is, the paced unfolding of the universe, must therefore be one with the latitude of creation, which can find place in it. So let's do postscripts. Postscript 1. Should we think that this is too non-physical, that our physics will never be able to embrace it, even if somehow in some form? Remember how we started. The caterpillar and the wasp, number 46, number 47. The wasp's incredible knowledge. How did it know the 9 points, precise points, to sting the caterpillar and how to twist its head such that it could remain alive, paralyzed, for the wasp young? The problem of, therefore, the evolution of an extremely complex and knowledgeable behavior, conjoined with the extremely complex structure or machine that will support the behavior. Two simultaneously 100% correlated problems. This is an in-your-face problem. Something has to give. Some worldview has to give. The problem cannot be blindly marched over, as we saw Eric Weinstein, Stuart Kaufman, as AI would do, etc. Postscript 2. In Carroll's book, you'll find none of these considerations. Deeply on the nature of time and measurement, the nature of order or disorder. Yes, he stays solely on the ground of the physicist, though even this ground, as I noted at the beginning, is replete with physics problems. In my opinion, they're going to have to come up higher. And there's an obvious point I've neglected. The never-seen reassembling of the broken coffee cup. This is left in Carroll in a purely statistical treatment, the opinion of physics. It can happen, the reassembling. It's just an improbability. For remember, all laws of physics are reversible. They're utterly unreflective of the nature, reality, and flow of creative duration, of time as a force. The picture to the right depicts it. The guy throws the bricks. It's simply an improbable event that they'll fall as a wall. This is the more probable way. Likewise for the order of the molecules at the top of the picture. It's just statistical. This is the conclusion after all of Carroll's discussion, that it's just improbable, the coffee cup. And remember, this is the treatment of parts, external parts that can be reassembled in physics mind. Not to mention this, as we move to the biological, and now we try reassembling. This is physics' answer to Bergson. Now there's a warning here. Physics is working at the end of the creative flow, not from its source or start. It is not capturing the total impetus or flow, just the mathematical extended order. The classic metaphysics sits at this end, of course. This metaphysic works for physics. The spatialization, the continuum of points, positions, the treatment of, quote, time, unquote, but only to a practical point. Physics, used in this mode, cannot be the basis from which we explain consciousness. For consciousness is already passed physics by. Physics is dealing with the end result. This, I'll note, is the privilege problem, the origin of the image of the external world. As I noted earlier, in my opinion, physics should start from Bergson's holographic model, the universe, brain as a reconstructive wave solution, consider and evaluate Bohm's supporting holographic model of the field, and work from there. Last comment, something down the road. Yesterday, I watched a Closer to Truth channel, name of the channel, video, What is the New Atheism? With Robert Lawrence Kuhn. Now, the new atheism seems to spiffied up more aggressive version of the old atheism. Lots of prepared talking points. And based on the same fundamentals as the old, that is, answers to the questions that have always seemed to require a God. The origin of the universe. Why science, Big Bang, now explains this. The nature or even emergence of consciousness. Science, AI. Neuroscience explains this. The emergence of beings, humans, life. The wasp and the caterpillar. Why science, evolution explains this. I saw one spokesman say quantum mechanics. This now explains everything. In other words, all of the questions that seem to require a God for an answer are now explained by science. Now, as most of you can see, I'm sure all of you, this series has been sending torpedoes at all of these points, making them kind of naive. Perhaps we should visit this. I think the God implicit in Bergson. It is the nature of God implicit behind Bergson's scene. We've seen intimations of this in the last few on creative evolution. So a bit of the theology inherent in Bergson, so to speak. So next, we'll see. Until then, signing off.